I want to switch gears here just a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed this, but it seems to me that failing schools, or that's as defined, are often presented as a racial exploitation matter. And
Right.
so my question to you is it? And if it is, what makes you think so or not think so?
Well, you have to look at the evidence. If you ask the question, are the failures race-based, right?
Hmm.
We have, what does the data say? Okay, so I'm not a fan when people do proportional comparisons. The proportions are going to be misaligned in a large data set, um, because all communities don't advance at the same pace evenly.
Right.
Okay, you're going to have Loudoun County where Black Americans graduate at 98.7%, right, and whites graduate at 99.1%. Okay, so they're very close to each other in graduation rate, and it's statistically irrelevant the differences that there are.
Yeah.
Um, but it's still in the high 90s. Okay, um, if we look at the data says that Blacks do well in the same schools that whites do well in, and whites do poorly in the same school that Blacks do poorly in. So let's look at Virginia's numbers. Virginia has 8 schools that have a double-digit gap in graduation rates between Black and white students. 4 of those schools, Blacks graduated at a higher rate in Virginia. Okay, let's take a look outside of Virginia to Baltimore. Baltimore, Black students graduated about 73% and some change. White students graduated about 72% and some change. So white students are lower, but they're always within 1 to 2 percentage points of one another. If racism was a factor, that wouldn't be true.
Yeah.
Right? You'd have white students shooting up here, you'd have Black students going down here. That's not the case. So racism is not a factor in it, and applying racism as a factor in education prevents us from addressing the real problems
Yeah.
with public education and with those kids.
Absolutely. And I think the numbers you just shared with our audience, I appreciate you doing that, because, it really reinforces what you said earlier, that, look, this is not a racial issue, it's a community issue. And as goes a community, so goes everybody in that community typically. And, and I think it's so important that our people understand that, because unless we know truth and really get reality and understand it to be so, we're trying to fix the wrong problems
Right.
based on assumptions that are not correct. And we'll never get there if we're trying to fix something based on, let me put it straightforward, a lie.
Yeah.
Let's know the truth, and the truth will set us free. Let's know the truth, and the truth will help us discover. Okay, so now we get what the real issue is. Let's approach the real issues in our communities. And so let's dive in just a little bit deeper. So we talk about money going into education and so forth in these areas, but maybe rather than pouring more money into our schools in those areas, our government should be pouring more resources and focus into areas of job creation, areas of just fixing brokenness in families, partnering with nonprofit organizations that specialize, whether it's faith-based or not or whatever, working to really try to bring healing and opportunity, create these strategic partnerships in these communities that really can go in, get an understanding of what's really going on, what are those core root issues, and then let's elevate and work on fixing those core problems. Because if we can fix core issues in the community, the natural default will be the children are going to start responding better, and it'll be a healthier culture and a healthier environment, and the natural result will be improvements also in our schools. Would you agree with what I just said?
Yes, I would agree with you 100%. I think that we have the data where we can pinpoint the issue. Okay, so I'm going to just talk about it from a Black community,
Sure.
Black
Please.
community. Now, when I say Black urban clusters,
Mhm.
the reason why we focus, when we look at Black urban clusters, Caucasian, the white and the Hispanic community around it performs in the same patterns as those poverty clusters. We focus on, when we say urban, it's because when we look at the poverty landscape across the country, yes, you have rural poverty with affordable housing, you have people being spread out in the different communities, but the reality of it is that when we look at all the statistics on poverty and graduation rates, et cetera, that skew the national discussion,
Right.
because of these clusters.
Yeah.
Right? Baltimore, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, South Chicago, right?
High population concentrations.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not uniformly true in the rest of the country. Now, in terms of, there's some studies that were put out, okay? And this has been over the last 30 years. And this is things that we know to be true, that we can test, that it's evidence-based. And what it comes down to is this. We know that the education level of the parent affects the outcome, that there's correlation in the outcome of how the child performs. If a kid has two parents that are educated, be both high school, both college, you can pretty much, in most cases, because you know how kids are, some of them go their own way. Yeah. But in general, they're going to perform better over over the kid who has a less educated parent, right? And we know what do we call it? We know other things such as, if you read to your kid, they do better, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
The question becomes, why is that? Because if you can answer that question, you suddenly have real insight into improving the education for kids.